Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Pressing Matters, and today we are going to continue the tactical profile series, and the team we are going to discuss today is going to be Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. Now, as football fans, some of us have been following the pre-season games and now the beginning of the Premier League season. So we have a general idea of what Arsenal are trying to do with their team, and their formation is quite close to the conventional style that they've been playing. So they're playing a 4-3-3. But what has changed in Arsenal's gameplay is, number one, the way in which they're using that formation, and number two, the players that are involved in that formation, so how they are approaching this particular formation and what they're bringing to it. We all know that Arsenal have acquired Kai Havertz and Declan Rice, who are both very, very good players. And if we go back to the Crystal Palace game, which was the last game that Arsenal played, so because Gabriel Jesus is not available, they were playing Eddie Nketiah through the middle as the striker, who had Bukayo Saka to his right and Martinelli to his left, which is quite normal because that is what Saka and Martinelli are generally doing in that team. They play on the wings and they play on the right and the left wing respectively. But what is interesting is how the midfield is functioning. So as expected, Declan Rice is playing the holding midfielder role or the centre defensive midfielder role, and he is right behind Eddie Nketiah. So if you look at the formation, but the interesting aspect is that he is being flanked by Martin Odeegard on the right and Kai Havertz on the left, which is slightly different from what one would expect, because conventionally you would say that Kai Havertz would either play up front or play in the number 10 role, so right behind the striker as an attacking midfielder. But here, Mikel Arteta is using Kai Havertz as a midfielder from the left flank, who is supposed to cut inwards and support Martinelli on the wing. So that is an interesting aspect of their gameplay. Another thing that is interesting is the fact that Martin Odeegard, who is supposed to have the number 10 role before Havertz came in, and who is supposed to be the team's playmaker, is now playing from the right side. So both of these midfielders who are creative, who have the ability to do something interesting with the ball and create chances, are coming in from the left and the right of the midfield and working inwards towards the goal, which is an interesting aspect because you do not expect them to be used in that way, especially in the case of Kai Havertz, who is supposed to be a far more forward aligned player. So he is supposed to be far further up, and that is part of what was the issue with Kai Havertz, that he was not being able to play that perfect role where he is behind the striker but ahead of the midfield at Chelsea. So to see Mikel Arteta using him in a different manner and bringing him further backwards in the midfield is an interesting proposition. Whether it is going to work out well or not is to be seen yet, because we've only seen him play 2 games for Arsenal in the Premier League. Another interesting aspect of the game with Crystal Palace was the fact that Tomiyasu, the left back that Arsenal are using, got a red card for time wasting in the 67th minute, which a lot of people are up in arms about because they think that was too harsh. But I do not disagree with the decision, because time and again we have seen a lot of teams, especially teams in important matches that have a 1-goal lead, wasting time and making the match very slow, uninteresting and unexciting, and just basically killing the flow of the game, which is something that the Premier League is now trying to avoid, and they've brought in new rules where time wasting will be penalized. So yeah, I think this is the perfect example of that rule being put into place, and now players should know that they cannot complain to the referee because they will get a card, and they cannot waste time and spoil the flow of the game because that also will get them a card. So I think this is a welcome change. The rest of the back was quite similar. You had William Saliba in the middle with Ben White, and interestingly enough, Thomas Partey was playing as the right back, which is not something that you associate with Partey because he is a midfielder, and ideally you would want him somewhere around Declan Rice or where Declan Rice was playing. So this was another interesting aspect, and I think Partey does have the ability to use his CDM skills and the skills that he gets from being a midfield player and bring them to the right back position as well. So I think that is something that he can manage to do if the team requires it, or if there is a specific tactical requirement for him to play there. And yes, Aaron Ramsdale was playing in goal, although there are rumors about another goalkeeper coming over and taking his place, but we will avoid discussing that. A few of the things that I want to point out about Arsenal, especially considering their pre-season performances and formations, are the fact that the style is very, very similar to Man City, and that is not a surprise. But what was a surprise was the fact that in attack, Man City in the pre-season were converging into a 4-2-4 formation with 4 players going up, with De Bruyne acting as a number 10 behind Haaland, and then 2 wingers going up. So that was a very interesting change in Manchester City's style of play, and they have not completely applied that to their team as of now in the beginning of the Premier League season. What was interesting about Arsenal though, and why I brought this up, was because Arsenal was using the same 4-2-4 formation in attack and trying to attack teams in that manner and create overloads, especially in the half spaces in the box. So yeah, we know that Mikel Arteta has come from the Pep school of tactical analysis and tactical play. We know that he has worked with Pep at Man City before, but the similarities between City and Arsenal are getting more and more clear to notice, and it is becoming very, very difficult to understand how their styles are different now. The one thing though that Arsenal has changed is the fact that they are now trying to build a team that is physically dominant, and that is evident in the fact that they have brought in Declan Rice and Kai Havertz, who are both physically dominant players and who like to use their body, use their physique and strength to push people off the ball or apply a lot of pressure when they are acting defensively, especially in the case of Declan Rice, and also in the case of Havertz when he is in a defensive role as an attacking midfielder or a forward line player. So Arsenal are now making sure that they can compete with the rough and tough teams which usually give them trouble or gave them trouble last season, and this is something that is being done so that Arsenal can be more competitive and can make sure that they can win games that are very, very ugly and that do not require as much technical capability as they do the ability to just rough it out and push players around and play a rough, tough game. So that is a welcome change if you're an Arsenal fan, because last season you did not have the kind of players in Arsenal or in the squad that could do that. So it made Arsenal susceptible to losses or draws against tough teams that had larger, stronger players who would not have the technical ability or the pace or the speed that Arsenal players had, but had the ability to physically dominate the Arsenal squad. Another thing that is very important is that Odeegard is likely to move up and play with Havertz as a number 10. So even though they're using a 3-4-3 role here, a 4-3-3 formation here, the one thing that we know about why Odeegard and Havertz are so important to Arteta's system is because both of them are supposed to push up from the midfield even in this system and play as number 10s. Now that is a very interesting proposition because that is something that we have seen in old school football where 2 number 10s are used again behind one centre forward. But this is something that Arsenal is trying to resurface and bring into their particular game now once again. So this gives them a lot of versatility in those half spaces, because now they have a centre attacking midfielder threat, not just from the right but also from the left, in 2 very capable attacking midfielders in Kai Havertz and Martin Odeegard. Another thing that is very, very obvious from the way Arsenal are playing are that they sometimes fall back into a 4-4-2 formation in defense, and that is even more prevalent when they are attacking in a 4-4 formation. So this is something that we have noticed in Arsenal's gameplay during the pre-season, where when they are attacking in 4-4, they fall back into a 4-4-2, and they try and make sure that they have 2 very strong lines of defense, one in the midfield and one in the defensive third, that the opponent's team has to cross, and they basically are using the parking the bus tactic here. Now, this is something that has not exactly worked out in the Premier League season's beginning, because Arsenal are still working out the kinks and they're using a slightly different formation. So they do not know which one out of Martinelli, or Saka or Nketiah should be falling back into the midfield four in defense. And regardless of that, they are still functioning on the same basic defensive principles, where they fall back quickly if they cannot gain the ball, and then they sit and try and absorb pressure and take the ball away in defense by causing a mistake or intercepting a pass. Now, another thing about Arsenal that is very, very interesting, especially in this season, is that they're trying to play from the wide spaces, or the wide spaces that are occupied by Martinelli and Saka, more than they are playing through the middle. So they're trying to create opportunities on the wide channels, and they're vacating the central channel, leaving only Declan Rice there mostly. And even Declan Rice, especially in the pre-season, has started moving up towards the left wing when Arsenal are attacking. So while Kai Havertz is working inwards through the left, and Odeegard is working inwards through the right, Declan Rice is keeping that center defensive midfielder position, but leaning towards the left side and going and supporting Martinelli more and more, because Kai Havertz has been given the brief to go further up and be the second striker, or be the support, or the number 10, the most forward placed number 10 to Nketiah. Whereas Odeegard is supposed to stay slightly behind Kai Havertz, although making the same movement, and play as a playmaker or create chances more than score goals. So that is what they are trying to do tactically. Another interesting combination that is not apparent in this particular game against Crystal Palace, but we have seen it in the pre-season with Arsenal, is the Rice and Partey combination, because they're both very good midfielders and they both have the ability to play the holding role very, very, very well. So what this has done is, this has given Mikel Arteta the option to approach that holding midfielder role in two different ways, or put these two players in the midfield and then try and activate Partey more, while Declan Rice stays further back and keeps the fort, or holds the fort for the rest of the midfield. So how these two will be used in the future is going to be very, very interesting, because now Mikel Arteta has more tactical versatility, because these two players are available to him in the midfield and can play the same position but in different ways. And like I said, I already mentioned, the team is more physical now. They are trying to build that capability of being able to play skillfully against good teams, but also be physically dominant against teams that depend on physical dominance. And like most teams in the Premier League, especially the top teams like Arsenal, City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester United, Tottenham, all of these teams, even Newcastle for that matter, like all these teams, Arsenal are looking to play long balls a lot more now, and they want to play quick long balls to transition from the defense directly to the attack. And what they're also trying to do is, they're trying to move the press up in a way where they invite the press and put a long ball up, so that the press gets dismantled, and they're trying to move the press of the opponent up towards their backline, so that they can facilitate that long ball, or at the very least try and approach the second ball. So when the long ball is connected to a player and it falls somewhere else, they want to be the first people to reach that ball. And that is a very interesting tactic. This is a good segue to tell you that I'm going to be doing a video on this particular thing as well, because old school football tactics are now returning to the Premier League, and certain roles that were played in old school football are also returning to the big teams in the Premier League. So this is something very interesting, because it's a case of history repeating itself and tactical cycles working their way through. So now the phase of the false nine is faded away, and we see a very different profile, especially in the big teams now. So yeah, build-up play, false nines and intricate passing is still prevalent, but it is giving way to long balls now in the good teams, and it is giving way to proper number 9 strikers who are known for their ability to do the conventional centre forward role. So yeah, we will talk about that in the next video. And the last thing that I want to point out is that Arsenal have shifted to a counter pressing tactic where they are trying to overload the ball, like I mentioned in one of my previous videos. They're trying to overload the ball when it is in the opponent's possession, when they lose it out in the attacking final third, and they're trying to bunch up on one particular player to either force a mistake or try and take the ball away from him in the first few minutes of, say, losing possession. So not even the first few minutes, you can say in the first few seconds of it. If that fails, then Arsenal have an idea of falling back into that 4-4-2 formation, or in most cases during the Premier League matches, they're falling back into their conventional 4-3-3, and then they're trying to defend from there if they're not able to actively counter press and get the ball back. So this tactic is also very, very similar to, say, Manchester United, for example, or some other top teams that are trying to apply this tactic, and you can see elements of this even in City's gameplay. So yeah, there are a lot of similarities in these big teams now. The formations of some teams are quite similar. In other cases, the tactical profiles are quite similar, or the way they're applying their strategies are very, very similar. So it's going to be an interesting mix now, and it'll be interesting to see which of these big teams manage to apply those similar tactics or similar formations a little better, especially against each other. Anyway, that is my piece. I hope you liked the video, and I hope you enjoy the Premier League season, because I'm very happy that it has started up again. And I'll see you next time with another video on a tactical profile for another Premier League team. Thank you.